So this video is just a summary of everything that we've learned before moving on to the applications. For the most part, I also forgot to include an exercise showing that the derivative of any arbitrary log base function is what I claim it is. So I'll give a brief proof here and include it in the summary. So what have we learned? It's come a long way. We started off with the definition of the derivative, and actually I should probably include that at the top of the summary here, because you do need to know the definition of a derivative at a point, the derivative, and then you need to know all of these differential rules. Now, here are all of the fundamental differential rules, right? The primitive basic functions that are not compositions of simpler functions. So x to the n, we use the power rule, and we have shown that the derivative is nx to the n minus 1, right? The trig rules, the e to the x and ln rules. And then over here on this side, I've given the kind of like lesser rules, right? The ones that may not be worth memorizing because they don't come up that often. And if they do come up, then hopefully you know how to derive them off the top of your head anyway. So if you, like me, need to sort of worry about economy of space in your brain and you want to know the fewest things possible while still getting all the answers, then you won't commit these to memory. I sure as hell don't. You'll just know these, and you'll know how to use the composite rules and whatnot to figure them out should you ever need them, which is hopefully rare. Now here's all the composite rules. Now the plus and the times rules were really easy and really easy to prove. And in fact, I forgot to drive home a really, really important lesson, which is the distinction between the rule for the constant multiple and the product rule, which so many people forget or confuse so easily. And it's not the worst thing in the world if you confuse them, because if you just always do product rule, you'll still get the right answer, but you'll just waste a ton of time and thought processing power when you didn't have to. So think about these examples. If you had the derivative of, let's say, 2 times x, I have seen so many students try to, and I'm sure I did when I learned this subject, try to calculate this using the product rule. And that is absolutely the wrong rule to, you'll get the right answer if you use product rule. You'll say the derivative of 2 is 0. If you're good at this, you'll realize that the derivative of 2 is 0, and then you multiply by x, and then you add 2 times the derivative of x, which is 1, and it all comes out to 2. But you really should have seen that not using the product rule, using the constant multiple rule, because this is a constant multiple, right? Not a general function. The product rule is for 2 general functions being multiplied together. And that's when you really got to pull out the big guns. But when it's a constant multiple, you just move that constant to the outside of the derivative. And now you're asking the question, what is 2 times the derivative of x? No need for the product rule. This just tells you it's 2 times 1, which gets you the same answer. So that's one important point. And another important point is that this also often gets confused with the rule for the derivative of a constant, right? That's yet a third thing that people often confuse in this mix of multiplication rules. The derivative of a constant is just always 0, right? If there's nothing else going on here, which, I used that just a minute ago, but remember, if it's just a constant, the derivative is 0. If it's a constant multiple, you pop that multiple to the outside and carry on with your day, computing derivatives. If it's a product of 2 more sophisticated functions, neither of which is constant, then you really got to do a little bit of work with the product rule. So anyway, getting back to the summary, So the sum rule and the constant rule are easy. The product rule is not the worst thing in the world. I've seen worse. The logically, the next thing that comes up is the chain rule, even though it would make sense to talk about the quotient rule next, just as like the next hardest thing to do. But again, I don't remember the quotient rule. I just remember the product rule and my little reciprocal trick. But you do whatever you like. And with the chain rule, right, you've got an outer and an inner function. I'm using the curly braces to try to really emphasize composition, because another mistake that I see a lot of students make is misunderstanding this as being f times g. So I really want to stomp my foot loudly and say, no, that's not what this is. This is not multiplying f times g. This is composing, putting g inside of f. That's totally different. And the rule for when you have that is take the derivative of the outer, plug in the inner, multiply by the derivative of the inner. You can help yourself perhaps by stating it in this way. So this is an equivalent statement of the chain rule. So over here we've got the inverse rule, and we're done. This is everything that we learned in this section, and moving on to applications in the future.